The scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey filled the room, but the warmth of Christmas dinner was pierced by one sentence that burned colder than any snow outside. "You're a burden. Get out of this house." The words came from my mother, Joanna, and they rang louder than the clinking of wineglasses or the soft jazz playing in the background. Silence fell over the long dining table. Forks paused halfway to mouths. My younger cousins looked down, unsure whether to laugh or cry. I felt nothing. Not rage. Not sorrow. Just numbness. 12 years in uniform, a medical discharge, a bullet wound still healing beneath my rib cage, and this was what I came home to. My name is Riley Monroe. Captain Riley Monroe. That title used to mean something. It used to get me respect. It used to open doors. Now, all it did was remind me that I was no longer of use. I stood slowly, my knee aching from the injury that ended my career, and reached for the duffel bag I had left by the door. The same duffel I had carried through sandstorms and airstrikes. Now loaded with little more than a change of clothes and the weight of a betrayal I had not expected. No one moved to stop me. Not my stepfather Gregory, who had always followed Joanna's lead. Not my cousin Dan, who once said I was his hero. Not even my sister Alyssa, who sat beside my mother in a designer dress, lips pursed as if to say, "This isn't the time." I glanced around one last time, hoping, no, praying, for someone to speak up. But the silence was absolute. I turned and walked out into the snow, each step crunching beneath my boots. The wind stung my scarred cheek, a souvenir from my final deployment. I pulled my coat tighter and began walking toward the main road. The lights of the house faded behind me, and with them, every illusion I had about what family meant. At the bus stop, I sat alone beneath a flickering street lamp. Snowflakes gathered on my shoulders, indifferent to my story. A late-night bus rolled up, hissing as it stopped. I climbed aboard without looking back. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, gave me a nod but said nothing. Maybe he recognized the look in my eyes. Maybe he had carried others like me. People who had given everything in return to find they had no place. As the bus pulled away from the suburban neighborhood, I finally allowed a single tear to fall. Not for what I had lost, but for what had been a lie all along. Joanna had never loved me. She loved the version of me that sent money home each month, that wore medals and stood straight in family photos. But not the broken body. Not the haunted eyes. Not the real me. And that night, as we sped through the frozen roads toward the countryside, I made a decision. I would go to the only place that had ever felt like sanctuary. My grandmother Estelle's farm. Whatever waited for me there, it could not be worse than what I had left behind. The bus rattled through the night, its heater humming quietly while the windows fogged with the breath of a handful of passengers too tired or too broken to speak. I sat near the back, watching the snow blur the world outside into streaks of white and gray. I had no luggage claim ticket, no welcome committee waiting for me, no plan beyond the next stop. But I had a name. Estelle Monroe, my grandmother, a woman of iron will and soft quilts. The last time I had seen her was the summer before my first deployment. She had stood in the doorway of her farmhouse, waving with one hand and wiping a tear with the other, telling me to always write, always come back, and always remember who I was. I had failed on all 3 counts. As the bus pulled off the main highway and onto a smaller snow-covered road, my heart pounded with both dread and something that felt dangerously close to hope. At the edge of town, just before midnight, the driver eased the bus to a stop near a wooden sign barely visible in the snow. I stepped off, duffel in hand, and was immediately swallowed by silence. No cars, no people, just the wind and the creak of the pine trees bending under their icy burden. I walked the last half-mile, my boots crunching against the frozen gravel. With each step, memories stirred like dust. Summers spent chasing fireflies, Estelle's hands braiding my hair, warm pies cooling on the windowsill. I didn't even realize I was crying until the tears froze on my cheeks. The farmhouse appeared like a lighthouse in the night, soft golden light glowing from the kitchen window. Smoke rose gently from the chimney. I stood for a moment at the gate, afraid to take another step. Afraid she might not remember me. Afraid she might not want to. But before I could raise a hand to knock, the front door creaked open. And there she was. Estelle Monroe. Her hair was all silver now, loose around her shoulders. She wore a thick cardigan, her feet bare against the wood floor. She looked straight at me, eyes sharp as ever, and said 5 words that brought me to my knees. So, they finally broke you. My legs buckled, not from exhaustion, but from the unbearable weight of being seen. Not pitied, not judged, seen. I opened my mouth to respond, but no sound came out. She crossed the porch in 2 steps and pulled me into her arms, holding me so tightly I could feel the tremble in her bones. I sobbed against her shoulder, my breath hitching, my pain pouring out in gasps. After a long moment, she pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. "You're not broken, Riley," she said. "You're reborn." And then she led me inside without asking a single question. The warmth of the house hit me like a wave. The scent of cedar and honey filled my lungs. She wrapped me in one of her old quilts and handed me a mug of something hot and spiced. "Sit," she said simply. "Tomorrow is time enough for talking. Tonight, just be." And in that small quiet moment, for the first time in years, I believed I could. The next morning sunlight spilled through the lace curtains in soft golden beams that made the room look like a dream I didn't deserve. I lay there for a long time beneath the heavy quilt Estelle had draped over me, listening to the distant cluck of chickens, the low creak of floorboards, and the hum of the old heater rattling in the corner. My body ached in familiar ways, but something else stirred beneath the surface. A quiet steadiness I hadn't felt in years. After dressing in one of Estelle's oversized flannel shirts and a pair of soft wool socks, I made my way to the kitchen where she stood at the stove, flipping eggs into a cast iron pan. She didn't turn to look at me, just pointed to the percolator and said, "Coffee's fresh." I poured a cup and sat across from her. No small talk, no awkward questions, just the sound of sizzling butter and the smell of breakfast. It was the most peace I had felt in a decade. After we ate, she pushed back her chair, looked me square in the eye, and said, "There's something upstairs I think you should see." I followed her up the narrow staircase that groaned with every step. At the end of the hallway, she opened the door to a room I hadn't entered since I was a child. My old bedroom. But it was different now. Dust coated the surfaces. Boxes lined the walls. Yet the wallpaper remained. The soft blue daisies I had picked when I was 7. On a small shelf sat a stack of my childhood books. Tattered paperbacks about horses and faraway lands. But what caught my eye was the drawer of the nightstand, slightly ajar, something peeking out. I opened it and pulled free a faded leather sketchbook. My sketchbook. I had thought it was lost years ago. I turned the pages slowly. My old pencil drawings were still there. Soldiers, mountains, a girl with sad eyes who I now realized had been me. At the very back was an envelope, yellowed with age, sealed. On the front, written in my mother's sharp cursive, were the words, "For Riley. To be opened when everything falls apart." I stared at the envelope, my hands trembling. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not yet. Not while my chest still ached from the sting of her voice telling me I was a burden. Instead, I slipped the letter into my duffel and turned to Estelle, who stood quietly in the doorway. "You kept all of this?" I asked. Her answer was calm and steady. "This house remembers you, even if your mother doesn't." I spent the rest of the morning wandering the property. The barn, the creek, the swing that still hung from the old oak tree. Ghosts of laughter followed me. Memories layered over silence. Every corner held pieces of a life I had almost forgotten was mine. That afternoon, Estelle handed me a basket and said simply, "Eggs." I went to the chicken coop, fell into the rhythm of the farm. The animals didn't care who I had been. They didn't care about medals or scars. They just wanted to be fed. There was a comfort in that simplicity. In the predictability of the chores. As dusk settled, I returned to the house. Estelle was knitting by the fire, humming an old hymn under her breath. I sat beside her, the sketchbook in my lap, the envelope tucked beneath the pages. The flames danced and cracked in front of us. She didn't say a word, didn't ask anything. And for the first time since I had stepped off that bus, I felt like I was home. Not in a place made of walls and shingles, but in the presence of someone who saw me not as damaged, but as whole. The next morning was gray and bitterly cold, but Estelle insisted we start cleaning out the old barn before the snow got heavier. We worked in silence, shuffling boxes, dusting off tools, rearranging crates full of things neither of us remembered owning. At some point, while lifting a rusted tin from the top of an old shelf, I knocked loose a bundle of old photographs that fluttered to the ground like leaves. I bent down and picked them up, thumbing through their faded edges. One photo made my breath catch. It showed a young woman holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket. The woman wasn't Joanna. Her features were softer, her eyes deeper. But I knew those eyes. They were my eyes. I turned the photo over. In faint pencil were the words, Meredith and Riley, 6 months. Estelle had gone still beside me. Her hands, always steady, now gripped the broom too tightly. I looked up and met her gaze. "Who is Meredith?" I asked, though I already knew. Her voice was a whisper. "Your mother. Your real mother." Time stopped. For a moment I heard nothing but the pounding of my heart, as if it wanted to escape the truth before I could fully absorb it. Estelle took the photo from my hands and sat down on an overturned milk crate. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremble beneath every syllable. Meredith was my daughter, Joanna's younger sister. She was everything Joanna wasn't. Kind, creative, full of fire but gentle in spirit. When she got pregnant with you, Joanna was furious. Said Meredith was throwing away her future. Meredith planned to raise you on her own. She loved you, Riley. From the moment she felt you kick. I sat on the dusty barn floor, not caring that the cold seeped through my jeans. I had spent my entire life believing Joanna was my biological mother. That her coldness was just a quirk, her disdain a reaction to my choices. But now it made a cruel kind of sense. Estelle continued, "When you were 2, Meredith died. Officially, it was an accident. A fire in her apartment. But Meredith was careful. She never left the stove on, never smoked, never lit candles near curtains. The cause of the fire was listed as faulty wiring. But I always had my doubts." "And Joanna?" I asked. "She took you in. Told everyone she was stepping up to raise her niece's child. She was praised for her sacrifice. But Riley, I don't think it was a sacrifice to her. I think it was about control. About erasing Meredith. And you." The edges of my vision blurred. Everything I had believed was unraveling in this cold, musty barn. My medals. My service. The years I spent sending money home. All done for a woman who wasn't even my mother by blood and who had done nothing but treat me like a mistake. I stood up, pacing. "Why didn't you tell me? Why let me grow up believing her lies?" Estelle looked away, her face taut with regret. "I tried. But Joanna made it clear. If I ever told you, she'd cut me off. You'd never see me again. I thought I could protect you by staying close. I see now that was cowardice. But I wasn't ready to lose you too." I ran my hands through my hair, heart pounding like a drum. "We have to do something. There has to be proof. I need to know the truth." Estelle nodded slowly. "There might be something else. Upstairs. Come with me." Back inside the house, she led me to the attic. The wooden steps groaned under our weight as we ascended. Boxes lined every wall. Near the chimney, Estelle pulled a faded quilt aside to reveal a trunk. Inside were old journals, newspaper clippings, fire reports, and a medical file labeled Meredith Monroe. I scanned the documents with trembling fingers. One page stood out, a hand-drawn floor plan of the apartment, with markings near the fuse box. Scribbled next to it were 3 words, "Not an accident." I looked up at Estelle, whose eyes shimmered with restrained pain. "I always suspected, but I never had enough to prove it. Maybe now, with you back, we can finally find the rest of the story." I wasn't just going to find it. I was going to bring it into the light. Whatever Joanna had done, whatever secrets she buried, I was done being silent. The attic was colder now, the kind of cold that sank into your bones and lingered like memory. I stayed there long after Estelle returned downstairs, sitting on the floor surrounded by dusty boxes and the weight of revelation. My fingers moved mechanically through documents and photos, each one unraveling another thread of the story I thought I knew. Near the bottom of the trunk, tucked between an old quilt and a bundle of letters tied with string, I found a leather-bound journal. It was old but well kept, the initials MM engraved on the cover. My heart pounded. Meredith Monroe. I opened the first page. The handwriting was strong, looping, and deeply personal. April 17th. Riley said the word, Mama, today. I cried for an hour afterward. She's mine, all mine. Even Joanna can't take that from me. I flipped through the pages, scanning years of entries. They painted a portrait of a woman both terrified and brave, fiercely protective and heartbreakingly aware of the shadows creeping into her life. There were entries about Riley's first steps, her drawings, her laughter in the bathtub. Then, the tone shifted. May 2nd, Joanna came by unannounced again. She keeps talking about taking Riley for weekends. I told her no. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something's off. I don't trust her. And then, near the end, the entry that made my hands go cold. October 9th. I heard something last night. Someone outside. Riley was asleep. I didn't turn on the lights. I don't know why, but I'm scared. If anything happens to me, if something goes wrong, promise me someone will tell her. Tell her I loved her more than anything. Tell her Joanna? The rest was scratched out violently, ink smeared like a storm. I stared at the page, the silence of the attic pressing down on me like a physical weight. This wasn't paranoia. This was fear. This was a woman trying to leave a trail in case she disappeared. A few pages later the journal stopped. No goodbye. No closing thoughts. Just an abrupt end, as if someone had taken the pen from her hand. I closed the journal carefully and cradled it to my chest, holding it like a relic. Meredith had tried to protect me even in her final days. She had seen the darkness circling. She had tried to leave clues. And Joanna, she had done everything in her power to erase them. But she had failed. Meredith's voice had survived in ink and pages. I returned to the kitchen where Estelle sat, staring into her tea as if it could predict the future. I placed the journal gently on the table. She lifted it with trembling hands. Her lips parted but no words came. After a long pause she whispered, she was going to run. She told me she had a plan to leave town with you. I asked her to stay, told her she was safe here. I was wrong. That guilt has lived in my bones ever since. I reached out and took her hand. You didn't fail her. Joanna did. And now it's time we stop protecting the lies. She nodded slowly, resolve hardening in her gaze. I asked her one more question. Do you believe the fire was set? She didn't blink. I've believed it for 20 years. And I think it's time we prove it. I looked at the journal, then back at Estelle. Meredith tried to speak from the grave. Now it was time I made sure the world finally listened. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the quiet darkness of Estelle's farmhouse. Meredith's journal resting on the nightstand beside me like a heartbeat I could still feel. Every creak of the wooden floorboards outside my room made me stiffen. Every gust of wind against the old glass windows pulled me back into alertness I hadn't known I still carried. At 3 a.m. I got up, wrapped myself in a sweater, and went to the kitchen where Estelle sat hunched over a worn manila folder. She looked up, unsurprised. Couldn't sleep either, she said. I shook my head and sat down across from her. Slowly, she opened the folder and spread out the contents. Newspaper clippings about the fire. Medical records from the hospital where Meredith had once been treated for smoke inhalation. But what caught my attention was a flash drive in a small velvet pouch. What's this? I asked. Something I've been afraid to open for years, Estelle replied. I found it in a box of Meredith's things long ago, but I didn't have the courage. Maybe it's time we both did. She handed it to me. Upstairs in her office was an old desktop computer that still worked. I plugged in the drive, the screen flickered to life, and a folder titled Simply Truth opened. Inside were 3 audio files, each marked with a date, and a series of scanned documents. I clicked the first audio file. A crackle, and then the unmistakable voice of Joanna. You need to stay quiet about Meredith. If anyone starts digging, it'll come back to you, Estelle. The tone was cold, calculated. The second recording was worse. Joanna again, speaking to someone else. She had a choice. She chose wrong. Don't pin this on me. I just cleaned up what she started. I covered my mouth as the words sank in. This wasn't just family bitterness. It was evidence. The third file was a phone call. Joanna and a man whose voice I recognized immediately. Senator Gregory Carr, her husband. I warned you, Joanna said sharply. The girl's getting too close. She still thinks I'm her mother. If she finds out, his voice cut in, tight and nervous. Then handle it, like you handled Meredith. I slammed the keyboard tray shut and stumbled back. There was no mistaking it. It was all there. Confessions. Conspiracy. And now it was in my hands. I returned downstairs, eyes wide with disbelief. Estelle, this changes everything. She nodded, her mouth trembling. I know. We need to take it to someone. The police won't be enough. Joanna has influence. We need a journalist. Someone who can't be bought. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a business card. Vanessa Cruz, investigative reporter. She helped a friend of mine once, when the police wouldn't listen. I called the number. The next morning Vanessa arrived, a woman in her 40s with a quiet intensity and a leather satchel full of recording equipment. We laid everything out for her. The journal, the documents, the recordings. Her face didn't move, but her eyes darkened with every revelation. When we were finished, she exhaled slowly. This is massive. If it holds up, it could bring down everything Joanna built. Her reputation, her political marriage, her legacy. And it will, I said. It has to. Vanessa began organizing the files, scanning and backing up everything. But she warned us. If we publish this, there will be retaliation. She'll come for you. She'll come hard. I looked at the wall where Meredith's photo now hung, smiling gently in the soft afternoon light. Let her come, I said. I've fought worse than her and survived. I'm not running anymore. That night as the snow began to fall again outside the windows, I opened the sealed letter Joanna had written years ago. The one labeled to be opened when everything falls apart. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. A twisted justification. She wrote, "You were never mine. I did what I had to do. Meredith was reckless. She would have ruined you. I gave you a future. You owe me everything." I read it twice, then fed it into the fire. Watching the edges curl and blacken, I whispered to the flames. I owe you nothing. Not anymore. The invitation came 3 days later. A thick envelope embossed with golden foil, inviting us to Joanna's annual Christmas charity gala held at the city's most exclusive hotel ballroom. It was her signature event, broadcast in local society pages, covered by lifestyle blogs, and photographed by paparazzi hoping for glimpses of celebrities and politicians. This year, the theme was rebuilding families. The irony made me laugh out loud. Estelle and I sat at the kitchen table with Vanessa Cruz and her assistant, outlining the plan. Vanessa would attend the gala as press, with credentials to cover the event. I would enter with Estelle as her guest, carrying a small folder with printed transcriptions of the audio files and a statement from me prepared for release. We would not confront Joanna publicly unless we had to. But we would be ready. When the night arrived, I dressed in a dark navy suit that still fit from my days at the academy, pinned with one small silver eagle brooch Estelle had given me for strength. Estelle wore a long burgundy dress and her pearls, her spine as straight as ever. You look like Justice, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As we entered the ballroom, all eyes turned. Conversations stopped. Joanna stood near the stage, greeting donors and smiling with effortless grace. She froze when she saw me. Her eyes narrowed, lips parting in disbelief, then curling into a tight, polished smile. Riley, she said as we approached, how unexpected. She gestured to a woman nearby. Excuse me, everyone, I need a moment with my daughter. We followed her into a side hall lined with portraits of past donors. Once alone, her facade vanished. What do you think you're doing? She hissed. This isn't the time or place. It's the perfect time, I replied calmly. And I'm not your daughter. She blinked, surprised, then recovered. You ungrateful little girl. I gave you everything. I saved you. You took me from my real mother. You destroyed her. I held up the folder. And I can prove it. Her eyes darted to Estelle, then to the folder, then back to me. You think anyone will believe a disgraced soldier and a bitter old woman? I smiled slowly. They won't have to believe us. They'll hear you themselves. The recordings, Joanna. The ones where you said Meredith got what she deserved. The ones where Gregory helped cover it up. Her skin turned ashen. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying her. Estelle stepped forward. This is the end of your game. We've already sent the recordings to Vanessa. If anything happens to us, the story will still run. Joanna's breath came shallow now, her voice strained. You don't know what you're starting. You'll ruin this family. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. You ruined it a long time ago. We're just uncovering what you buried. Behind us, Vanessa appeared with her phone in hand. The press release is scheduled. You have one chance, Joanna. Make a statement. Admit the truth. On your terms. Or watch the world do it for you. Joanna stared at her, then at me, and something shifted. Maybe she saw it was over. Maybe she realized the truth was already out. Her shoulders slumped. She turned away, back to the party lights, the music, the perfect illusion of a world she controlled. I'll make a statement tomorrow, she whispered. Alone. You'll get nothing more tonight. Vanessa nodded. Then I suggest you enjoy your last gala. The guests already suspect something. There are whispers. And in the morning, there'll be headlines. Joanna walked away, poised but shaken, like a glass chandelier about to fall. I stood there in the hallway, the weight of the folder gone but the weight of justice just beginning to settle. Estelle placed her hand on mine. You did it, she said. We're not finished, I replied. But tonight, we broke the silence. When we exited the side hallway, the crowd parted around us like water. No one spoke. No one stopped us. They all knew something had shifted. We didn't stay long. We left quietly, slipping into the night like ghosts finally freed. Back at the farmhouse, I changed out of the suit and into flannel and wool. I poured tea for Estelle and sat beside her by the fire. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I always knew you'd find your way back, she whispered. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and soundless, covering the roads, the pain, the lies. A clean slate waiting to be walked upon. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind a bright world of white and blue. The sky was cloudless, the air sharp, the kind of cold that wakes your blood and clears your thoughts. News of the gala confrontation spread fast. By noon, Vanessa's article was live, backed by the recordings and verified documents. It detailed Joanna's manipulation, her lies about Meredith's death, the adoption forged through deceit, and her political husband's role in keeping it quiet. It was everywhere: television, radio, social media. Joanna Carr, the respected philanthropist, was now a name tied to scandal. Gregory Carr released a statement announcing his resignation from public office. He called the revelations devastating. He claimed ignorance. I didn't believe him. Few did. In the days that followed, people came forward. Former employees, neighbors, even a retired firefighter who had responded to Meredith's fire. Their stories added fuel to the blaze. Joanna tried to deny everything, then shifted to silence. Eventually, through her lawyer, she accepted a plea deal. Charges would be filed. Her legacy would crumble. Her power stripped. But none of that brought Meredith back. And none of it gave me the childhood I lost. Still, it was something. It was truth. And truth, I was learning, was its own kind of justice. Estelle and I began turning the barn into something new. We cleaned out every cobweb, replaced the windows, and installed heating. What once held dust and ghosts now welcomed light. With Vanessa's help, we founded a nonprofit, a creative retreat for veterans and survivors of trauma. We called it the Shelter Line, a nod to both military service and the idea of finally finding safety. I started painting again. The sketchbook I found in my old room sat open on my desk each day, its pages slowly filling with colors and faces I had once been too afraid to see. One afternoon, while organizing supplies, I opened a box labeled Meredith. Inside were more journals, letters, even a recipe book in her handwriting. Estelle must have been saving them for the right moment. I spent hours reading them, learning her voice, her humor, her fears. One entry stood out. It was written the night she found out she was pregnant with me. I don't know if I'm strong enough, Meredith had written. But maybe strength doesn't come before. Maybe it comes because of. I held that page for a long time. And then I cried in the quiet, surrounded by the life she had tried to give me. A few weeks later, a package arrived addressed to Estelle. It was from Violet. She had read the article. She had seen the evidence. Her letter was 5 pages long. It was not a defense of Joanna. It was an apology. She admitted to suspecting something was wrong but being too afraid to ask questions. She told us she had left her husband, started therapy, and was trying to understand how much she had let herself be molded by lies. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote. But I hope, one day, to be part of something real. Estelle wept as I read it aloud. She always believed Violet had a good heart under all that polish. And maybe she was right. Healing, I was learning, did not happen in a straight line. One day you feel peace. The next, you're shattered again. But each time, you rebuild. Stronger, more honest. I began writing too. My memoir, my story. For Meredith. For veterans. For anyone who has ever been erased. Estelle said the words as I wrote them were a light for someone else to find the path back. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than expected, revealing green shoots beneath. Estelle moved more slowly now. Her bones ached. Her eyes tired easily. But her voice remained sharp. On her 82nd birthday, she stood in the middle of the barn-turned-center and said, "This is the home I always dreamed my family would make." And we have. That night, I painted her portrait. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, head tilted slightly, a small satisfied smile on her face. I titled it The Anchor. It hung in the entrance of the retreat, where everyone could see who built the foundation. In late April, we received word from Vanessa. A documentary team wanted to adapt our story. Not for headlines, but for impact, for truth. Estelle hesitated, but I said yes. Because truth matters, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The film premiered in June, shown at a local art center with veterans and survivors in attendance. When it ended, the room was quiet. And then came applause. Not polite, but fierce. A kind of clapping that felt like a storm breaking. Ren, the young woman who had once introduced herself after a workshop at the center, hugged me after the film and whispered, "You told a story I never could." Thank you. In July, the retreat reached capacity. Dozens of men and women came each week to find quiet, to paint, to speak, or simply to sit under the oak tree behind the barn. The one I had once swung from as a child. On the anniversary of Meredith's death, Estelle and I planted a second tree beside the oak. A maple. We placed a stone at its base engraved with her name and the words, "She lived. She loved. She mattered." The next morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a photo of Joanna, taken from the back. She sat alone on a bench in a city park, hunched over, shoulders bowed. A single sentence was scrawled on the back. "Some truths never die." I looked at it for a long time. Then I burned it, not out of hate, but because I no longer needed the shadow. Estelle passed away 2 months later. Peacefully, in her sleep. I held her hand the whole time. She left me the farm in her will, along with a final note that read, "Now it's your turn to make the world gentler." "I will," I whispered. "I promise." Today, the barn is filled with light and life. The paintings hang in neat rows. Veterans laugh in the kitchen. Survivors cry in the garden. And I, once a soldier, once a burden, now a builder of sanctuary, sit at my desk and write the final words of this chapter. Truth did not come easily. But it came. And with it, came peace. That is enough. That is everything. Summer burned bright that year, golden fields stretching beyond the horizon. The air humming with the sound of bees and hope. The retreat thrived. Local schools sent art teachers to volunteer. Veterans wrote poetry and painted their battles in colors they had no words for. One evening, as I watered the tomatoes beside the house, the mailbox creaked open behind me. A delivery truck pulled away, leaving a single manila envelope resting gently inside. I took it inside, hands damp from the garden hose, curiosity stirring somewhere deep. No return address. No postmark. Inside, folded carefully, was a letter. Handwritten. The paper old, edges yellowing. My breath hitched as I unfolded it and saw the signature at the bottom. Meredith. My mother. My real mother. The letter had been dated 2 weeks before the fire that took her life. It began simply, My dearest Riley, if this ever reaches you, it means something went wrong. I hope it never does. I hope I am the one who watches you grow up, who makes you pancakes on Saturdays and kisses you goodnight after bad dreams. But if I'm not, then I need you to know 3 things. First, I loved you before you were born. I loved you when you were a heartbeat and when you were a name. Second, you are not the product of my mistakes. You are the proof that I tried to do something right. And third, you are stronger than anyone will ever understand. This world is unkind to girls who fight back. But keep fighting. There is beauty in that. There is truth in you. She had sealed the letter with a pressed daisy. I touched it, brittle and pale with time, but whole. As I read and reread her words, I felt a wound close. Not erased, not healed completely, but closed, gently, with the grace of understanding. Later that evening, I walked to the hill behind the barn where we had planted Meredith's tree. I sat beneath its shade, watching the sunset spill fire over the fields. I thought about Estelle, about Joanna, about the people who had hurt me and the ones who had saved me. I thought about the girl I used to be and the woman I had become. And then, in the final rays of sunlight, I took out a piece of paper and began to write. Not a report, not a memoir, a letter, to the girl I would someday help. To the next Riley who would stumble from a place of pain, looking for something to hold on to. I wrote, you are not alone. Your story matters, even the broken parts. Especially the broken parts. They are the places light gets in. And then I signed it the way Meredith had. With love, always, Riley.